Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of my fixed review. If you haven't watched the first part, then I highly recommend that you watch it before you watch this video in order to better understand everything that I say in this video. For those of you who have already watched part 1, let us proceed forward. Because of how much backlash and how much hate there is surrounding Fixed, there is a lot of discourse going around that if the movies of Ralph Bakshi came out today, people would hate on them in the same way they hate on Fixed. Now, for those who are unaware, Ralph Bakshi is more or less the father of adult animation. Adult animation exists because of him. If there was ever a Mount Rushmore for animators, it would be Walt Disney, Hayao Miyazaki, Ralph Bakshi, and I don't know who the fourth one could be. Steven Hillenburg, Matt Groening, I don't know. The fourth slot is open if anyone wants to take it. Throughout the 70s and 80s, Ralph Bakshi would put out a lot of different animated movies that were aimed towards adults. A lot of common tropes that you would see in adult cartoons today, they came from his movies. Arguably his most famous movie is Fritz the Cat from 1972. Now I feel like everything that I say here could very easily apply to any of his movies, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just gonna exclusively focus on Fritz the Cat. Ralph Bakshi made a lot of animated movies geared towards adults throughout the 70s and 80s. He made an adaptation of Lord of the Rings in the late 70s, long before Peter Jackson's iconic beloved trilogy. His final movie was Cool World from 1992, which there's a chance some of you watching this have heard of this movie. This was a Who Framed Roger Rabbit knockoff that failed critically and commercially. After that, he would retire from making animated movies, and given the fact that he's 86 years old as of making this video, he doesn't really have much time left on this earth. I find it to be a shame the fact that someone as influential as Ralph Bakshi will end off his career with a dud, an apparent dud from what I've heard. But I mean, there's nothing any of us can do about that, unfortunately. Now I've got to admit, I've never seen any of his movies. I've never seen Fritz the Cat or anything like that. I've never seen his adaptation of Lord of the Rings. I've never seen any of his movies at all. I am saying all of this as someone who is unfamiliar with his work. The most that I know about Ralph Bakshi is that he pretty much started adult animation as we know it. And a lot of people that have tried and failed to defend Fixed claim that if any of Ralph Bakshi's movies came out today, people would hate them in the same way they hate Fixed. If Fritz the Cat came out today, people would hate it in the same way they hate Fixed. And I feel like a lot of the people that say this completely miss out on a very important piece of information regarding why this comparison doesn't work. Now, at first glance, both of these movies appear to be very similar to each other. Again, I've never seen Fritz the Cat, so maybe the movie is completely different from Fixed, but just looking at everything from a surface level, it does seem like there are similarities between these two movies. They both focus on talking anthropomorphic animals. Fixed focuses on dogs, and Fritz the Cat focuses on what do you think? Also, both movies are very heavy with their vulgarity. Both movies have a lot of obscene jokes and whatever in it. A lot of F-bombs and swear words and sex jokes and all that thrown into both movies. The tagline for Fritz the Cat, if I recall correctly, was, "We ain't rated X for nothing, baby," or something along those lines. Looking at the similarities between these two movies, one could very easily wonder why people have a problem with Fixed, but they don't have a problem with Fritz the Cat. At first glance, it might seem hypocritical to love Fritz the Cat or not have a problem with it, but then complain about Fixed for the style of humor that it has. However, I feel like these people completely ignore a very important key detail that makes Fixed different from Fritz the Cat. Fixed came out this year in 2025. Fritz the Cat came out in 1972, over 50 years ago. When Fritz the Cat came out in 1972, it was controversial and shocking. It was bold and daring. The idea of there being swearing and sex jokes in something animated, in an animated movie, was unheard of at the time. Fritz the Cat was the first one to do it. And then we fast forward to 2025. We look at Fixed, and it's no longer shocking or controversial, the idea of there being swearing and sex jokes in something animated, in like an animated movie or a cartoon. It has long since become normalized, the idea of there being F-bombs and sex jokes in cartoons. And as a result of that, Fixed does not come off as being bold or daring when compared to Fritz the Cat. Let me educate you all on a famous trope known as Seinfeld is unfunny. Now, Seinfeld is a show that needs absolutely no introduction. It is frequently regarded as one of the greatest and most important TV shows ever made, and it proved to be very influential to a lot of different sitcoms. The name of the trope does not come from the belief that, oh, Seinfeld is a bad show or anything like that. That's not why the trope is named Seinfeld is unfunny, because Seinfeld, I mean, I guess, you know, it might not be for everyone, but Seinfeld isn't a bad show objectively. Seinfeld the person is bad, but Seinfeld the show is good. More so, the name of the trope, and just the entire trope in general, comes from the idea of like someone today watching Seinfeld in this day and age and not really seeing what's so special about it. Let's say hypothetically, I watch Seinfeld for the first time, and I watch it and it's like, maybe I don't hate it necessarily, but I fail to see what's so special about it. I fail to see what makes it so different from other sitcoms. I could potentially find it to be derivative of other sitcoms without anything to make it special or fresh from other sitcoms. Something that I would not take into consideration in this alternate universe is the idea that, like, when Seinfeld was airing back in the 90s, a lot of the stuff that was in it was very unique and fresh for television. There was no other TV show that was doing what Seinfeld was doing at the time. There were no TV shows that did what Seinfeld did before Seinfeld. Seinfeld was the first one to do it. I would hypothetically criticize Seinfeld for being derivative of other sitcoms, when in actuality, it's the other way around. A lot of these tropes that other sitcoms would have, they would originate from Seinfeld. Seinfeld would be the first one to do it. And I would not acknowledge that at all. I would fail to take into consideration the fact of when Seinfeld aired, and the fact that, like, you know, there was nothing else that was doing what Seinfeld was doing at the time. I would look at Seinfeld and I would think of it as being a derivative of other sitcoms that were actually influenced by Seinfeld, because it was the first one to do it. Hence the term Seinfeld is unfunny. The general idea of Seinfeld is unfunny is something that was considered groundbreaking and revolutionary when it came out, but is now considered nothing special by people who weren't there when it first came out, people who are unaware of its influence, and they think it's just generic and derivative because of an oversaturation of things that were influenced by this once revolutionary thing. And that is exactly what Fritz the Cat and maybe all of Ralph Bakshi's movies fall under, but again, for the sake of simplicity, I'm only going to use Fritz the Cat as an example. When Fritz the Cat came out in 1972, it was shocking and controversial, the idea of there being swearing and sex jokes in something animated. Nowadays in 2025, it is no longer shocking or controversial. It has become normalized. And so someone could watch Fritz the Cat today and they might not see what's so special about it because of that. Or worse, God forbid, given the reputation that adult animation has nowadays, people could potentially hate this movie because of the fact that it seemingly has the same unfunny style of humor as Big Mouth or Has Been Hotel, completely oblivious to the fact that this long predates Big Mouth and Has Been Hotel, and that the style of humor that those shows have come from this movie. It all started with this movie. Fritz the Cat was the first one to do it. As someone who has consumed an ungodly amount of bad adult animation, I feel comfortable in saying, if I ever watched Fritz the Cat, there's a strong chance that I might hate this movie. There's a strong chance that I might not find this movie funny. Even with the knowledge that, yeah, this movie was the first one of its kind. It was the first one to have a lot of the tropes that would become standard for adult animation. Even with that knowledge in mind, I would still have a hard time potentially watching this movie and finding it funny. And not to mention, there's a small chance that I could potentially hate this movie because of its historical importance, and not despite its historical importance. Fritz the Cat is the reason why adult animation exists. Fritz the Cat is the reason why there's animation that's targeted towards adults. However, it is also the reason why adult animation is the way that it is. As I previously mentioned before, a lot of adult animation is just the exact same thing. Constant swear words and sex jokes, just obscenities and vulgarity non-stop 24/7. Nothing to actually make it mature. And all of this started because of Fritz the Cat, because of the style of humor that Fritz the Cat has. This movie came out in 1972. This movie came out over 50 years ago, and so you would think that in the time since then, we would get adult animation that is significantly more mature than what this movie had to offer. This movie was good as an early stepping stone for adult animation becoming normalized. The raunchy, vulgar style of humor that this movie has, it was a good starting point for adult animation. But eventually, as time went by, we would have to evolve. We would have to mature a lot more. You would think that we would start getting animated movies that are targeted towards adults, and they have the same depth, the same maturity that one would expect from, a Christopher Nolan movie or a Martin Scorsese movie. We would start getting cartoons for adults that have the same level of writing as Breaking Bad or The Sopranos or The Wire or any of those other shows. Breaking Bad is obviously not a kid's show. It is a show that is intended for adults, and the show makes that very clear with the many dark, serious themes that can be found throughout the show. And so you would think that adult animation would move on from this style of humor. We would be getting animated movies for adults that are just as mature as Christopher Nolan's movies, and we would be getting adult cartoons that are just as mature as Breaking Bad and The Sopranos. And instead, 50 years after this movie came out, and we're still getting adult animation. We're still getting adult cartoons that have the exact same style of humor as this movie. The same sort of like, oh, we're adult and we're mature because we say the F word a billion times and we make a lot of sex jokes, that sort of thing. No changes to the formula, nothing like that at all. It's just the exact same crap that we have been getting since 1972. And I find that to be absolutely insulting. I understand that that's not necessarily the movie's fault. That's not Fritz the Cat's fault. That's not Ralph Bakshi's fault. That's not their fault at all. The problem is not Fritz the Cat. The problem is all of the crap that was influenced by Fritz the Cat. I know there's tons of other people that have said this. I'm not the first person to ever say this, but it's so embarrassing how we have animation that is literally intended for kids, that is significantly more mature than quote-unquote adult animation. And no, don't worry, I'm not gonna be that kind of person. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna use literal shows made for preschoolers and toddlers and whatever as an example of kids' cartoons being more mature than adult cartoons. I'm not gonna be like, oh guys, Bluey and Dora the Explorer are so deep and mature, they have a lot of messages about society, man. They're super deep. You can't handle the emotional maturity of Jake and the Neverland Pirates, man. I'm not gonna be like that at all. Family Guy, an adult cartoon, is more mature than Dora the Explorer, a baby cartoon. And yet, Avatar The Last Airbender, a kid's cartoon, is significantly more mature than either one. Avatar The Last Airbender is a show that's intended for kids, and yet it is significantly more mature. It is significantly more adult than Fixed. It is more mature and adult than a lot of adult animation. I look at Avatar The Last Airbender, and then I look at, Hell of a Boss, and it's like, the difference is night and day between the two. How is the former a kid's cartoon, but the latter an adult cartoon? What the man? And I must remind you all again, Fixed was created by Genndy Tartakovsky, who made Samurai Jack, which is another show that's not intended for adults, 5th season notwithstanding, and yet it is significantly more mature and adult than most animation that's actually intended for adults, including Fixed. The ironic thing is that a lot of adult animation would actually be more appealing towards kids. A kid could watch Fixed and they would think it's the funniest thing ever because, the dogs say the F word a million times and that's funny and hilarious, The humor is so immature and juvenile that any stupid kid could watch it and find it funny, but then no adult can find it funny. I cannot imagine an adult watching this movie and finding it funny. So yes, if Fritz the Cat came out today, people would hate on it in the same way they hate on Fixed. If Fritz the Cat came out today, people would find it unfunny, but not for the reasons that you think. Remember, when Fritz the Cat came out back in 1972, it was shocking and controversial, the idea of there being swearing and vulgarity and whatever in something that's animated. The idea of a character in a cartoon saying the F word stopped being shocking or controversial a very, very long time ago. If Fritz the Cat came out today, people would be comparing it to Big Mouth, and rightfully so. There would be nothing to make it stand out from Big Mouth or Has-Been Hotel or anything like that. There would be nothing to make it distinguishable from all the other adult animated slop that we've been getting. It's different because it was the first one to do it. It's different because it came out during a time when this sort of thing was genuinely controversial. The historical importance of Fritz the Cat completely goes away if the movie came out today. There would be nothing to make it special or stand out. There would be nothing to make it unique or fresh when compared to all of the other adult animated slop. There would likely be something else that would come before Fritz the Cat that would pioneer and revolutionize adult animation, and that would cause Fritz the Cat to just be generic adult animated slop had it not come out in 1972 and instead it came out more recently. If Fixed came out in the early 70s and Fritz the Cat came out today, the reactions to both movies would be the complete polar opposite. The idea of Fixed being historically important to animation is absolutely f***ing hilarious just thinking about it. It's more funny than anything that's in the actual movie. But if the movie had come out in the early 70s or like in the 80s or so, yeah, it probably would have been a different story. It probably would have been genuinely historically important. A lot of the tropes that are very common in adult animation, they would have originated with Fixed had it come out in the early 70s or so. In the universe that we live in, a lot of these tropes are originated from Fritz the Cat. And for whatever reason, instead of trying to evolve past this style of humor and making adult animation that actually feels mature and serious, we are still to this day getting adult animation that has the same style of humor as Fritz the Cat. Obviously, not all adult cartoons are like this. We have gotten adult cartoons that aren't just, oh, F-bombs and sex jokes and that's it. There are adult cartoons that actually feel mature and serious, but they are very few and far between. And just to clarify something, I don't even necessarily hate juvenile humor or anything like that. Superbad is one of my favorite movies of all time. I know people are gonna look at me and they're gonna think I'm a hypocrite, but let me explain. The difference between Superbad and Fixed is that not every comedy is like Superbad. Not every comedy has the same raunchy style of humor that Superbad has, whereas all adult animation is just like Fixed. All adult animation has the same style of humor as Fixed. If every single comedy in existence had the same style of humor as Superbad, I wouldn't find Superbad funny. The fact that not every comedy has the same style of humor as Superbad allows for me to find Superbad funny. It's as simple as that. I'm sorry for how long this turned out, but I found this to be a particularly ugly case of whataboutism, and as a result of that, I felt the need to debunk this whole thing as much as I could. I wonder why people hate Fixed, but they love a Fritz the Cat. I wonder what makes Fritz the Cat different from Fixed. Even if I watch Fritz the Cat and I ended up hating it, I would still acknowledge that there's a big difference between it versus Fixed. Anyways, to wrap things up, Fixed is a terrible, terrible movie. You already knew it was going to be terrible from the trailers, and the final movie being terrible is not really surprising in the slightest. Is Fixed the worst movie of 2025? No, it's not, surprisingly. I think Hurry Up Tomorrow still holds that mantle, although it might not hold it for very long, as I've heard amazing things about that new War of the Worlds movie that came out. But I haven't seen that movie, so for the time being, Hurry Up Tomorrow still remains the worst movie I've seen this year. Unlike Hurry Up Tomorrow, Fixed actually has this magical thing called a storyline, which, that alone, is a massive advantage. I am genuinely, to this day, still convinced that Hurry Up Tomorrow doesn't have a storyline. If you walked up to me and you told me what is the storyline of Hurry Up Tomorrow, I would not be able to tell you at all. It is an absolute clusterfuck of a movie. But if you asked me what was the storyline of Fixed, I could be able to tell you that. because not only does this movie actually have a storyline, but I can also actually understand this storyline. I can understand what's going on in this movie. Now, one could argue that would actually make the movie worse, given how much gross stuff there is in this movie. But you know what? Unlike Hurry Up Tomorrow, at least Fixed feels like a movie. A really bad movie, but a movie nonetheless. However, Fixed is easily the worst animated movie of 2025. Yes, I think Smurfs isn't as bad as Fixed. I think Fixed is a worse movie than Smurfs. Smurfs is a generic slop baby movie. Fixed is a movie that perfectly captures everything wrong with adult animation. Fixed is a movie that just further reminds me of the wasted potential that adult animation is. A movie from 2025 should not have the exact same style of humor as a movie from 1972. Somewhere out there exists an alternate universe where we got animated movies that were actually for adults and they were actually mature and serious. We got animated movies that could be put on the same league as like Martin Scorsese movies, Stanley Kubrick movies, Christopher Nolan movies, etc. And we would be getting cartoons for adults that have the same depth and maturity that one would find in like Breaking Bad. And instead, most adult animation uses the exact same stale, unfunny formula that this over 50-year-old movie used. And when this movie used it, it was actually fresh and funny. Now, in 2025, when I see an adult cartoon, or in this case an adult animated movie use this formula, it is no longer fresh or funny. And the slop just keeps on going, baby. It'll never end. Big Mouth ended earlier this year, giving us hope that there might be a god after all, only for us to immediately get Big Mouth except with animals coming out next year on Netflix. And let's not forget as well, Hazbin Hotel is not only getting a season 2, it's also getting a season 3 and a season 4. Yeah, adult animation becoming good is something that is not going to happen for a very long time. And as much as I hate to say it, Fixed is part of that problem. I don't care what anyone says. I hate this movie, not just because it's bad, but also because of what it represents. We should be getting adult animation that is mature and serious, but instead, every single piece of adult animation that comes out, every adult cartoon that comes out, has to be the exact same damn thing. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point people get tired of this style of humor dominating adult animation. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up getting adult animation fatigue, very similar to how we have superhero fatigue. But at the same time, if adult animation fatigue were to exist, I feel like it would have happened a long time ago. Now, before I end off this video, I just want to say once again, please do not harass any of the people that worked on this movie. I don't care how much you hate this movie, you should still not go out of your way to harass the people that worked on it. Do not harass Genndy Tartakovsky for making this movie. Just do not do any of that, please. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see y'all next time. Adios.